Okay, so you're looking to really get a grasp on something important, right? To cut through the noise and understand it properly without wading through endless text.
That's the goal. Fast but thorough understanding.
Exactly. And today we're doing a deep dive into the 1960s folk revival. It's this fascinating period where music wasn't just reflecting change, it was, well, helping to drive it.
It really was a powerful mix of art and social consciousness.
For sure. And you can't talk about that era without mentioning Joan Baez. Her voice, her activism, she's central.
Absolutely iconic. But, the sources we're looking at, they also shine a light on a whole group of other really vital female artists.
Yes, that's crucial. It wasn't just one person.
Understanding that collective impact, the different voices, that's key.
Right. So the mission for you, listening to this deep dive, is to understand how these women, their songs, their actions, really became part of this huge cultural, well, upheaval.
And we've got some great source excerpts to draw from, giving us glimpses into that time.
Okay, so let's set the scene. The 1960s. What was going on that made the folk revival possible, even necessary?
Well, the sources paint a picture of intense change. You've got the civil rights movement really building momentum,
Huge momentum.
growing protests against the Vietnam War, a whole counterculture questioning, everything.
Its establishment values, all of it.
Exactly. And that kind of environment, it's fertile ground for music that speaks truth to power, that addresses those big issues head on.
And folk music was perfectly positioned for that, wasn't it? This blend of tradition and very current commentary.
Precisely. And stepping right into that is Joan Baez. The sources often call her the queen of folk.
And you see why. That debut album in 1960, it wasn't just singing old songs, was it?
Not at all. It was a real statement. You had these ancient ballads full of history and social weight,
Right.
alongside these very direct contemporary protest songs. It showed she respected the roots, but was also totally engaged with the present moment.
Established her voice immediately. Yeah. And her performances, like at the Newport Folk Festival or the March on Washington in '63, those felt different.
They were more than just concerts. They became touchstones, didn't they? Pivotal moments.
Yeah, that image of her singing "We Shall Overcome" right there with Martin Luther King Jr.
Wow. That moment, according to the sources, really became this powerful symbol. It sealed the bond between the music and the struggle for civil rights.
And her whole thing was nonviolence, right?
Mhm.
That was core to her message.
Deeply committed. And that resonated so strongly with the movement's philosophy. She wasn't just a singer, she became a symbol of peaceful resistance.
But, like we said, it wasn't just Baez. The source material highlights other amazing women. Judy Collins, for instance.
Judy Collins. What stands out there reading the excerpts is that voice so clear, so crystalline.
Beautiful voice.
And while she definitely sang socially relevant songs, a lot of her own writing explored more personal things. Love, loss, that inner landscape.
So she showed the breadth of folk, maybe. That it could be both political and deeply personal.
I think that's a good way to put it. And then you have Odetta Holmes.
Okay, Odetta, the sources call her the voice of the civil rights movement. That's a powerful title.
And it seems entirely earned. Her music, this incredible mix of folk, blues, gospel vows, it just had this raw, undeniable power.
You can feel it even now, listening back.
And then the sources really emphasize her direct impact on the activists themselves. It's mentioned how her performance at the '63 March on Washington genuinely inspired people like Rosa Parks and Dr. King.
That's incredible. Music not just as commentary, but as fuel.
Exactly. A catalyst, really.
And we also need to talk about Buffy St. Marie, Universal Soldier.
Yes. Such a defining anti-war anthem. It just captured the feeling of a generation questioning that conflict, didn't it?
Absolutely. But
Yeah.
she was more than just that one song, the sources point out.
Oh, much more. A fierce advocate for Native American rights, for social justice across the board. She brought this vital perspective as a Cree woman that wasn't often heard in the mainstream.
A really essential voice. And Mary Travers
Yeah.
from Peter, Paul, and Mary.
Right. Their harmonies were everywhere.
They were huge.
And the material suggests they were incredibly skilled at taking these sometimes complex social messages and making them accessible. They reached a massive audience.
Kind of brought the folk revival's core ideas into living rooms across the country.
In a very polished, palatable way, yeah, which helps spread the message far and wide.
So you have this whole chorus, really, these incredibly talented, principled women using their art to challenge things, to demand better.
Pushing for justice, for equality, using their platform.
Now, thinking about specific moments where things really connected, The sources talk about the 1964 Newport Folk Festival,
Hmm.
Baez and Dylan.
Yes, that's highlighted as a really significant, almost symbolic performance.
Why simple?
Well, it represented this intersection, didn't it? You had Baez representing perhaps more traditional folk lineage, sharing the stage with Dylan, who was becoming the face of this new wave of contemporary protest songwriting.
Emerging of streams, maybe.
Something like that, a powerful moment of connection between those two forces within the revival.
But then, just a year later, 1965, Dylan plugs in. He goes electric at Newport.
And, oh boy, did that cause a stir. The sources describe a really intense reaction.
Yeah, the folk purists were not happy, were they?
Not at all. For some, it felt like a betrayal, a move away from the perceived authenticity of acoustic folk. But others saw it as, necessary evolution.
It really kicked off a huge debate about what folk even meant anymore.
Definitely. A real turning point and a source of major controversy within the community.
And it's interesting, the material notes that Baez, even amidst all that backlash, she still supported Dylan.
She did. The sources suggest she understood the need for artists to evolve, that the message was maybe more important than the instrumentation.
Recognizing the bigger picture, perhaps.
Yeah, her continued championing of his work speaks volumes about her perspective on artistic freedom and the music's cultural impact beyond just genre rules.
Okay, let's dig into some of those more specific, maybe surprising details the sources offer, like Joan Baez singing in Spanish and French.
That's a fascinating point. The sources highlight how this wasn't just a gimmick, it genuinely expanded her reach.
How so?
Well, it allowed her to connect directly with non-English speaking audiences, didn't it? It underscored the idea that her message, peace, justice, was universal, crossing language barriers.
Makes her message feel even bigger. And that relationship between Baez and Dylan early on, the sources shed some light there, too.
They really do. It shows how intertwined their paths were, especially in those early days. It's clear Baez was instrumental in getting him noticed.
How did she do that?
By inviting him on stage with her, championing his songs when he was still relatively unknown, the sources paint it as a really key, mutually influential relationship back then.
Helping launch one of music's biggest figures.
Wow.
And we should circle back to Odetta for a second. The sheer weight of her influence.
Yes, the sources really drive home that her impact on the civil rights movement is hard to overstate.
It wasn't just background music for the struggle.
Not at all. The accounts suggest her music was a direct source of strength, of courage for people on the front lines. When leaders like Parks and King explicitly say her music motivated them, that's profound.
Truly profound. And Buffy Marie's Universal Soldier,
Yeah.
you listen now, and it still hits hard.
It really does. The sources mark it as capturing that specific anti-war disillusionment so perfectly, but they also remind us of her lifelong activism.
Right, her work for indigenous rights.
Exactly. A deep, consistent commitment to justice way beyond that one song.
You know, something else the material touches on is the feel of those live shows, especially in the smaller folk clubs.
Ah, yeah. It wasn't like a stadium concert, was it? The sources describe this real intimacy.
A connect.
A real connection. They were like community gatherings, places where people with shared concerns could come together, feel the music, feel connected to each other. It built solidarity.
Amplified the message, maybe, in a different way.
Definitely fostered that sense of being part of something bigger, a shared movement.
Okay, so let's try and pull this all together. For someone listening, what's the core takeaway from this deep dive into the 60s folk revival and these incredible women?
I think the main thing, the real insight from the sources, is that this wasn't just music. The folk revival, with Baez as a leading light, but crucially supported by this whole chorus of women, it was a genuine force for social change.
It shaped things.
It absolutely helped shape the cultural and political conversation of the 60s. These women weren't just singing catchy tunes.
No, they were challenging injustice head on.
They were inspiring activism, giving voice to dissent, and creating this legacy that, frankly, still feels relevant.
Their courage to speak out, often against the grain, is remarkable.
Using their platforms for causes they believed in, even when it wasn't easy. Their music really became the soundtrack for a generation demanding change.
So as you, the listener, think about all this, maybe consider how much that legacy still matters.
Yeah, do those messages of justice, of equality still resonate with the issues we see today?
Are there parallels between then and now?
Yeah, it's worth thinking about.
And it really drives home the power of a voice, doesn't it? The sources seem to confirm that idea we started with.
That a single voice, especially when joined by others,
Can actually make a difference, can play a real role in changing things.
it seems the evidence we've looked at offers a pretty strong yes to that.